Yes.
It's okay, this is just the come up. Hello and welcome to another episode of Zelf on the Shelf. I'm Tanner.
I'm Sam.
If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and do that right now. We really appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, we're pros now.
We're doing our much requested psychedelics video today. Yay!
I thought of this title specifically ages ago from
3 years ago. Yeah.
LDS to LSD and kept looking and no one's done it yet. So I'm like, someone has to do it. And if not now, when? And if not us, then who? And if not this reason, then why?
What reason? Name one. I think I was resistant to doing this video just because I really care about it and I want to do it justice. But I think ultimately with YouTube videos and, you know, the format, you just have to have a conversation and accept that it will be what it will be.
Yeah.
And it also doesn't have to be like the only conversation you ever have. So I'm just trying to take the pressure off and yeah. But I mean, psychedelics have just been such a big deal in our lives and our healing journey that, yeah, I mean, you can probably relate to that, wanting to do it justice and, yeah, communicate in a way that is like smart and helpful and blah, blah, blah.
Having sat down multiple times to like type out a thing that ultimately would be much more boring than just having a chat about it.
Yeah, it's just a chat, guys. Also, Tanner's wearing our bucket hat that we have for sale on our Etsy store, so if you're interested in buying one of those, it's a really cool piece of merch. It doesn't look like merch. The logo is awesome, and it really helps us out when you buy our merch.
What better way to in public signal that you are in fact cool? We come before you today in the midst of winter, dressed as the invincible summer. Spring really is what it is, but the quote is summer, so
yeah,
trying to make
sorry
Camus proud. Camus, who famously said,
the only question worth considering is whether to kill yourself.
Yeah, which was a question that was answered by LSD for me.
So true, yeah. That was a big question. Let's start there.
There we go.
Please don't demonetize the video, YouTube.
No, let's talk about the LDS part of the video. Mm-hmm. When you were LDS, did you have any conception of LSD?
You have a little bit of hot chocolate on the side of your mouth.
Yeah, we're drinking some novelty British chocolate today.
Yeah, my mum gave me these vegan hot chocolates, and they are just okay.
I like it.
What's your question?
What was your conception of drugs, or maybe LSD specifically, as a Latter-day Saint?
So I was very anti-drug my whole life. For those of you who don't know, I joined Mormonism when I was 16 and left when I was 22. But prior to joining Mormonism, was very anti-drug. And also what I knew about LSD, I mean, they gave us like the English dare equivalent in school, you know. But my uncle did a lot of LSD when he was young.
That's right.
And he is an anorexic and hasn't lived a healthy, joyful life. Sorry, I don't really want to tell anyone else's story, but he's had a lot of issues and mental health issues. So I didn't associate LSD with healing, is what I'm trying to say.
Gotcha.
Because I think the way that he used LSD was very much like high amounts. He loved the thrill of scary things happening. Like he loved when the trip would be like, there's a giant monster coming. This is what I remember of him telling me. And he would always talk about LSD to us, me and my cousins when we were young. He'd always bring it up, and have come to find out as an adult that there would be, you know, I have memories of childhood where he actually was on LSD, which actually I do think was often a good thing for him. Again, with like the eating disorder, that's a whole other thing. But I remember he said to my cousin once, if you're going to do a drug, it should be LSD. And we were all just like, okay. You know, just like crazy uncle. But come to learn that he's not wrong.
He's
right.
Not
wrong. I mean, I'd say mushrooms LSD, you know, not specifically LSD necessarily. But yeah, my perception of drugs was definitely bad. And I would say even right after I left the church, I remember having a conversation in the car, I don't know if you were there, where we were kind of talking about, well, what do we think about weed being legalized now that we're not Mormon? And I was like still against it, you know, just thought drugs were bad. And it was only once I learned that sort of cannabis and psychedelics had benefits and also weren't necessarily really harmful the way that I had been taught to think that they were, that my mind sort of started opening up, which was, you know, probably in the first year of leaving Mormonism, after leaving. But what about you? I assume bad. You thought they were bad?
Yeah, I remember... I mean, because we did DARE, and it always, Mormons, I remember, at least my experience, was always being, like, very alcohol-focused when people were talking about bad things. And drugs kind of always took like a backseat to alcohol being bad, and I'd have the spooky Mormon hell dream of like accidentally taking a swig of beer and then being like, I'm going to hell.
Okay, but that makes sense to me because like realistically, if you're a Mormon teenager, you're going to be tempted by alcohol because I just think, I mean,
more available.
It's more available. Yeah, drugs aren't necessarily commonplace. I know they've become more mainstream, but it makes sense.
But I remember, in high school was really into like 60s counterculture. Even as a Mormon, I loved the music. And even though I myself was very conservative and all that, I just loved the vibe for some reason.
And when my mum met Tanner as a Mormon, she was like, does Tanner do drugs? He did not do drugs. He's just always had a drug personality.
Yeah.
Which I think is a nice thing about you.
Yeah, I was in an art class once, and I remember talking with a kid who had done drugs, and I remember we were talking about God or something. He's like, I just believe that God is love, and that's what drugs taught me.
You're like, you fucking idiot.
And I was like,
He's
God is
hellfire.
God is literally some guy near the planet Kolob, okay? Like, you didn't get the memo. God isn't just love. But I also remember around that same time being like, I'm so curious about marijuana. It seems so interesting. Like, maybe someday when I'm like 90 years old, I can do it, and then I'll repent, and then I'll have a great story to write to the Ensign about.
Yes, at 90.
So then, fast forward, go through the whole Mormon thing, the whole Mormon faith crisis. We talked yesterday on our interview with Cults to Consciousness, which you can watch on YouTube, about that process and how leaving the church just left both of us feeling so nihilistic, empty. It's kind of the thing that Mormons want you to feel when you're leaving the church. It's like, if you leave the church, you'll just wander aimlessly and nothing matters and you just want to kill yourself, and it's so horrible. And
it's like, well, yeah, if you remove your community and meaning and purpose and sense of security in the world,
identity, and
then that is going to have, I mean, although obviously people do leave and just kind of immediately step into a new kind of joy, that happens too, but yeah, it's not surprising that people are depressed when they leave.
Right.
And it's not different in any other religion that's like less true in the eyes of Mormons,
Yeah, it's like when traumatic things happen, it's hard. But and it wasn't, all bad. There were also moments of, elevation comparable to the Holy Ghost, where like that sense of freedom and real freedom was the thing that I just remember oftentimes being like overwhelmed with the beauty of, and just being like, wow, how cool. Like I literally can just like live life as I want. And I don't have to do all these things that I've been doing that I don't want to do.
And don't you feel like even though it did take time for us to find meaning and purpose, I do feel like we quite quickly turned to hiking as an outlet, which I think was good.
Which kind of coincided with the psychedelics usage. Helping actually connect with nature versus, I have always had, I'm grateful to the Boy Scouts for instilling in me a love of the outdoors. But definitely after psychedelics was kind of like, whoa, nature is so cool and I just want to be here all the time.
Yeah, and like allowing, because also we were watching a lot of Planet Earth at the time, and so I think it was definitely a big thing that can dawn on you after you leave Mormonism is just the idea that you weren't put on the earth, that you are the earth. And that, I don't know, that is quite a profound difference in perception of reality, isn't it? It's hard to truly connect to the earth if you just think it's this thing that's there to serve you, that you were just plopped down on, that it's almost like, well, yeah, it only exists for you. And as
this
opposed
artifact.
it's humbling to realize that you came out of it and that you are one iteration of, many versions of the same thing, like just thinking of mammals, and then obviously you can widen that to every, but.
Yeah. I started believing in evolution as a Mormon in school because I took science classes, and there's just no denying it. Like, all the church schools teach that evolution is real is because you just literally can't deny it at this point. But they would also hand in hand be like, but here's what the prophets have said, and we're not going to tell you which one is right. Here's just all the evidence, and then what the prophets said, and... And
then at BYU Idaho, they made you write an essay at the end of the term, saying like how you were able to kind of reconcile these two competing things. So basically, you had to write an essay saying how you're able to reckon with the fact that there's all this evidence and the fact that prophet said this. So I wonder what everyone else's essays were like, but mine was just some I don't know, bastardized reality where it was just like, well, maybe God was experimental. I don't even know what I wrote at this point, but just interesting to have to do that in a college class.
But once that reality really really felt comprehended, it changed everything. Because it's like, I guess at that point my like hybrid belief was like, oh yeah, God used evolution to get us to this point, and then he sent spirits in, and now we're like our own thing and we're in charge of the earth and blah 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 blah. But realizing, no, like from the Big Bang till now, it has been this ongoing process that is just the result of physics happening for a long time, and probability and things connecting and interacting in new ways, novel ways, and life merging and self-consuming and altering. And I remember watching Planet Earth with you and just being like, whoa, this is like way better than the Temple movie. Like, this is what I feel like I learned so much more about reality just watching animals, and you can see yourself in it. You can see like, oh my God, I'm literally a mammal. I do that same shit.
I don't know if I would have been able to, I don't know if Planet Earth would have captured I did like Planet Earth as a teenager before Mormonism, but I don't know if it would have captured my attention as much as a Mormon. But there was something about after Mormonism when you're free to just see everything for what it is and not have to fit it into these specific boxes, where it just feels like you're learning about yourself through because it's seeing how similar we are to other mammals, and I don't know, like Planet Earth has a really good way of like bringing things to life in these other beings, and I really do think it makes you less arrogant or have less of a superiority complex about your place in all of this. But I don't know if that would have been possible in Mormonism. Also, I remember watching a TED talk towards the end of our faith crisis that was about, it was something related to the universe and just the scope of the universe, and this guy was exploring some big question. I don't remember what it was, but I remember just feeling like terror in my stomach, because I was like, this isn't compatible with Mormonism. I could just feel it, but I didn't think anything he was saying was untrue, because, it was a TED talk. They're not allowed to lie in those.
Very heavily
Did I derail
regulated
you?
tag.
Sorry.
No, that was great. I just remembered that I wanted to give a disclaimer at the beginning that we are in no way encouraging people to do psychedelics, and I don't even mean that in like a don't do it, or it's like,
Yeah, you have
it
to
really
figure out.
isn't for everybody. And the longer I've been exposed to the scene, and it's been a long time since I've like tripped, but I'm more aware now than I used to be. And I think it's also part of why we've been kind of hesitant to do about it, or to talk about it, a little factor. But it really is not for everybody. So we aren't encouraging everybody to do it. People with a family history of psychosis or schizoaffective disorders obviously shouldn't do it. And sometimes you don't even know if you have a predisposition for triggering that kind of event.
That's a tough one though, because anyone can be afraid and just avoid it because of the potential risks, but then it's also like the potential benefits are so great. Again, not everyone should do their own sort of research and sort of thinking about this. It should be a question that everyone considers quite a lot personally, and obviously there is a fear of drugs that a lot of us have instilled in us from our upbringing.
And the government has definitely accentuated a lot of the risks with the war on drugs and stuff.
So I agree with what you're saying. Like, they're not for everyone, but most of the people I know who've done them have benefited profoundly. And so I don't want to undersell that either. This is not commentary on whether you should do them. This is just our experience.
Yes.
But I mean, I do kind of, what's that Sam Harris quote? Like, to live a life without the psychedelic experience is kind of like a life without sex. And I feel like that's a pretty good quote, because it's like, sex isn't for everyone either. There are people that are asexual and are not interested, or there's various reasons someone may never want to have sex. I don't know, it's not a perfect analogy, but I
feel that. And truly, like, as we'll go through in this video, it was life altering and affirming in the best possible way for me.
And we also kind of, in a way, stumbled our way through them. I mean, we were always safe. We were always in a safe setting. We might have been like in the woods, but we were never, we've always been pretty reasonable, never took ridiculous doses, or so
always have a timer
always
going.
We always had like other people around. So I feel like we did it in, I don't know, it was sort of safe, but it was also like, I didn't know what I was getting into when I started it. I didn't know you kind of can't know what the psychedelics experience is going to be until you have it. You can read the research, you can listen to other people's experiences, but it is just because it is an altered state, it's impossible to like truly capture in words what that is going to be like. So I do feel like some people who I feel like would really benefit, I mean, who am I to say, but who might really benefit from psychedelics get so hung up on the potential risks, which aren't insignificant, but also I do feel like from most people probably pale in comparison to the potential benefits. We don't have to have this as a discussion. You guys get what we're saying. Be smart. Like don't listen to strangers on the internet.
Do your research.
Yeah.
Make judgments for yourself. And there's legal in some places, like with ketamine therapy, ways to get introduced to that thing in a legal, safe environment. Ketamine is very different than LSD, but for people who are stepping into altered states of consciousness, it may be favorable to seek that kind of...
And there's different personality profiles as well. I think we were sort of okay with doing that plunge and sort of... Because I think we were also at rock bottom, so we were like, well... Let's see what can happen. Yeah,
and that is how it started for us, feeling, I mean, for me, I was just looking for something to help, and psychedelics were just kind of, they've been in like a blooming of information and discussion in the last few years. And
I do feel like when we did them was when they were just starting to like come back into the zeitgeist again. Like Sam Harris was talking about them.
Yeah, Joe Rogan.
I think How to Change Your Mind was either on the cusp of coming out or had come out, I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah.
And so it seemed to me like a way, because I felt just such a spiritual deficit with the loss of Mormonism, and that was what people were describing, these like transcendent, beautiful, life-affirming experiences. So around LSD specifically, I was still very nervous. I remember saying maybe to you like, oh, maybe I'll try it when I'm like 70 or something, you know? And now I'm like, no way, that's...
Yeah.
I'm actually not a fun person to do drugs with, like...
Because you are very sensible.
And like, it takes it out of me. I can't like have fun and keep up a conversation, or like I just lay down and eyes closed and I'm out for 8 hours.
I think I suppose how old were we when we did psychedelics? I think I was 23 probably, or maybe I was 22.
I was like 25, 26.
Yeah, so technically my prefrontal cortex wasn't fully developed, but it didn't seem to be a problem because they did really help. I mean, I know 22, there's a difference between 22 and 16. So, and also I don't think that's a perfect science, the prefrontal cortex thing, but it is interesting to think about because you do hear 25 as sort of like, wait till then.
Yeah, I don't know that there's like definitely the more you use mind-altering substances early on in your life, the more likely you are to experience sort of the negative side effects of it. But I don't think that there's like a general risk of people like damaging their brains like Dare would describe.
I remember the thing that kind of started swaying me, other than all the research that was happening, was there was this chart that showed like the relative risk of different substances, and LSD and mushrooms, I think, were even lower down than marijuana on the list of like potential damage or potential death risk, or I don't know. Yeah, I suppose I didn't you hear LSD and you think acid and you think that sounds really bad. So it doesn't, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, I would try mushrooms, but I wouldn't try LSD, and I think it's because of that perception. But I think they're pretty like comparable in terms of, I think people have this idea, kind of like the nature fallacy in a way that mushrooms are better because they're more natural, but I don't know, anything that can happen is natural. So if we invented LSD, then is that not natural? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
I feel,
Not with everything. There's like a million caveats you can make to anything you say on YouTube.
But the research to this point indicates that LSD is really bodily harmless, and also the risk, psychological risks, and there are some, but in contrast to other substances like alcohol or even cannabis, is so minimal. And
I often feel like a lot of people would probably have an easier time starting with LSD, like a small amount of that, rather than mushrooms, which I think can be quite...
can get real personal.
Yeah, real personal. Real childhood trauma rehashing.
So what was your first LSD experience like?
Are we just talking about LSD in this video? I assume
we're just kind of, generally, but,
Well, my first psychedelic experience, I think, was with two friends Well, I suppose I was with 3 people on a hike, and I did a small amount of mushrooms, and I just remember the colors were brighter, everything was beautiful. I felt this profound love for nature.
You texted me while I was at my Mormon family reunion.
That sounds
right. I was
right.
like, are we getting into drugs already?
Yeah, because I don't even know if we tried marijuana. Maybe we had.
I think we had.
But yeah, I just remember it being really beautiful. It was on a hike. I think it wasn't like an ego death experience, but I think like the ego lessening was useful. And I just remember there being kind of like in my mind, it became clear to me that like certain things that feel so important on a day-to-day basis really aren't that important. You know, like your phone or, I'm trying to think of another example, but you know, just really feeling like present, connected to nature, noticing nature in a way I never had before, like looking at the details of nature. And I really feel like this was the start of my love affair with nature. Like it had been growing, but suddenly being put into this altered state where I could really notice these tiny details, you know, instead of just needing these like grand landscapes to feel awe. It was like, whoa, every single tiny piece is like so amazing. Mm-hmm. So that was my general gist of what I remember from that. What about you?
My first like psychedelic experience feels like was actually on a cannabis edible. Mm-hmm. And just it was an experience that was overwhelming and surprising, surprised by the joy and the beauty of the experience that gave me hope that life could be beautiful.
That feeling of like being surprised by the joy and the beauty that is possible, that feels like a big thing.
Yeah.
Because it is new, even if you've been someone that has been grateful throughout their life and, you know, have loved certain things before. I don't know, there is just something about lessening the ego and... Sorry, you just carry on.
To me, that the experience was like... I mean, I was still fresh out of Mormonism and still filtering, like, everything through that lens. So I was like, this was the experience meeting God that I always wanted as a Mormon. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't meeting God, it was just meeting myself and realizing what I actually am. And the experience of, and I think this is common in psychedelics experiences generally. So psychedelics, your whole brain is lighting up at the same time in a way that's never been experienced before. To me, it just felt like connecting all the dots of information that I have ever had inputted into me and showing how it was all connected.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd be a systems thinker in the way I am now if it wasn't for psychedelics.
Right. Now, the one part of your brain that is actually dampened, and Michael Pollan talks about this in How to Change Your Mind, is your default mode network, which includes your prefrontal cortex, the part of you that associates with a individuated self distinct from your environment. So with your default mode network, your sense of I being diminished, I had the experience of realizing and just experiencing myself as the universe experiencing me, as this long sequence of connected events that have ultimately led up to this moment of the universe drawing back the curtain and seeing itself peering behind. And to me, that was like a religious experience, like that beautiful. I fell down in your bathroom and was just crying and was like amazed that I could experience it. Like I was not anticipating something like that. And it kind of like opened my curiosity to trying other things. And then the other psychedelics that I took later reiterated that sentiment and that feeling of being the universe entire experiencing me. And it made me understand like some scripture in different ways, in more mystical ways that I just wouldn't have understood in my like strict Mormon context.
So many things that I came to believe to be true or realized on psychedelics, I then realized that other spiritual teachers like Jesus had taught, and words that kind of just had abstract meaning to me before. I was like, oh, is it possible that someone at some point, whether it was Jesus or whatever guy wrote who Jesus, who knows. But you do start to realize how many people throughout history, like thousands of years ago, were kind of tapping into these same ideas. You're not like having a groundbreaking revelation no one's ever had before.
Right.
But it's not mainstream, and it's not something you can necessarily get to in your regular life, because you are... it is, you know, it's like if you're a fish in water, how are you supposed to know that there's a bigger, wider world outside the water if you can never get outside the water to see it? And it's just kind of that, isn't it? If you're always in yourself or up until psychedelics, it's like my whole life I was so in the self. I was so invested in the idea of myself as a separate being. And I know people can meditate or have certain experiences that kind of do give them a break from that. That can happen. But it hadn't happened for me until psychedelics.
Same. So then I remember doing psychedelics with you and a friend on a hike, and that just being like an overwhelmingly beautiful experience. And then, you know what? It might be like, there is a possibility we're like exactly a year, like on the dot anniversary of the time we did it, because it must have been around this time, right?
What?
I have to look now.
It's January. We left the church roughly.
We did it in January 2017.
Did we really?
Yeah, like the first week.
2017? Sometimes I look back on events and I think that they were ages apart, and then I'm like, that was 2 months apart, because when you're younger, time feels different.
Totally.
So a time span that now would feel like nothing felt like a whole lifetime back then.
And
I think we had done mushrooms in the summer before that, so
yeah.
And
all those experiences were very interesting and beautiful and insightful. We had some that were, I remember doing mushrooms with you and having it was kind of a panicked moment of like the existentialism of things, of new paradigms hitting. And
God, when I realized free will wasn't real, that one hit.
That's what I'm talking about. I remember feeling like this curtain had been like opened in my mind, and there was just like cogs in this machine, and just being like, whoa, I'm just a reaction to many reactions.
And at first that felt sort of devastating. There was like a grief of that, because I remember just thinking, I just want my mum to feel like my mum. That's very telling, but that's what came up. You know, instead of just like it was almost like everyone just being the product of their genetics and conditioning, and free will not really being real in the way that we see it as, it depersonalized things in a way that I had to grieve. It's like having to grieve the loss of the self. I don't know.
Which is, again, gives insight into Jesus' statement that in order to find yourself, you have to lose yourself. And it's like, that's one of those things. It was like, oh yeah, and the kingdom of heaven is within. Oh yeah, okay, got it. I feel that my body did feel like this temple of awareness. And that's really what psychedelics did, is shift my sense of identity from being like this body, this thing, to awareness that is, at this point, from looking from this perspective, but I look into your eyes and I see that same awareness looking back, and I look into a cat's eyes and it's like,
it's a good thing we were such good friends, because now I look back and I'm like, those were such intimate experiences to just have with someone, you know. But I mean, we'd gone through our faith crisis together, and you know, it was all perfect at the time for what it was. But just now, the thought of doing psychedelics with anyone just is, it's so much. Yeah, but I suppose it was very useful back then to have. Also, I feel like we were so lucky, because me and you, I don't know, there's ways our brains have been like similar kind of the whole time we've known each other. So I feel like our psychedelic journeys took us on pretty similar routes, and like we were able to be on the same page a lot of the time about what we were experiencing, which feels like something I didn't recognize at the time as like rare. But now when I people tell me about their psychedelic experiences, or for some reason I'm around people who are doing them for the first time, I'm like, oh, everyone doesn't have like the same realizations in the same kind of order. But it did, I suppose, because also we were constantly bouncing our ideas about life and existence off each other anyway prior to the psychedelics,
and trying to learn as much as we could, because we were sort of open slates at that, or clean slates, open books at that point, ready to receive whatever
new slates, open books.
Fresh fallen snow, just waiting to be imprinted by the great minds of humanity.
Beautiful. I feel very appreciative that we were able to have each other through those experiences, and because I mean there were things that I'm like, there was no one else in the world I could have explained it to, or knew would be able to compute it in the way that I needed them to compute it. But it's like I knew your brain intimately enough that there was like a safety in that, in having those experiences together.
Sweet.
Cute.
So how was your first LSD? Well,
it was just a microdose, and It was mostly just a fun time, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I came home and you were having because you
I
had
did
done a bigger
full
amount.
trip,
Yeah. So my first time was just kind of dipping my toe in, had fun. It was, it was lovely. It was nice, felt good. But then future LSD experiences. The summer before I got divorced, I did quite a lot of, again, I mostly have used LSD in like microdose, or I think they call it a macrodose when you do like a half tab. But I've had a lot of life-changing LSD experiences on quite small amounts, like a quarter or a half,
very manageable
of a dose. Yeah. And I would just, I spent like a whole summer having quite a few experiences by myself where I'd walk by the river, and I was really kind of finding myself that summer and like learning how to love myself and take care of myself for the first time in sort of an adult way. Oh, there's so much that can be said about what they did for me, but I really think it was also like it allows you to go to a spiritual place and to sort of it can take you to it's really useful to get outside of yourself, I guess, is the main thing. And I feel like LSD specifically allows you to sort of zoom out from yourself, observe your patterns, observe maybe the way you treat people, observe like the way you treat yourself. And also I feel like combined with mushrooms, which really for me like took me into my childhood trauma more and taught me how to reparent myself before I knew about the concept of reparenting in psychology, which was cool. That combo was very useful of like going into my trauma and understanding myself better, and giving 5-year-old me a hug that experience may have sort of been buried forever were it not for psychedelics. I mean, maybe not, because life's long, you never know, but yeah, a lot of things were brought up, and then I feel like LSD enabled me to do the necessary zoom out from the things that were coming up to sort of establish healthier ideas about, well, what do I want moving forward? Or you kind of get the opportunity to like break all the pieces of yourself apart and then decide how you want to rebuild, which is a lot harder in regular life, because again, you're just like if you never get out of the water that you've been swimming in forever, you don't know what you don't know. And you can't, it's just tough because you've only ever experienced life through your own brain, and obviously you're still in your own brain when you experience LSD, unless you subscribe to like some theories about universal consciousness. But it is just, change is hard, and especially when it's you need to make a lot of changes that are related to very like deep wounded wiring. I really feel like it helped me crawl out of sort of a hole that I don't know how else I would have crawled out of, and I would have found my way, I'm sure. I would have. You move forward one way or another.
You get by.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a reason I was drawn to psychedelics, and I was open and ready for big sweeping changes. And also just being like a 22-year-old woman who was married was a big thing I struggled with, and a big thing that psychedelics helped me reckon with in a way that was often quite painful, because I think psychedelics make you confront hard truths. Like, that's another thing with psychedelics, that there were so many things I didn't realize I wasn't allowing myself to accept or see, that like on some subconscious level are true because you're avoiding them, or you're repressing them, or you're engaged in efforts that kind of stop you from being aware of them. Does that make sense? And then on psychedelics, you're just forced to confront these truths, which is like, I don't want to be a 22-year-old wife. Like, I didn't really choose this for myself. At the level of awareness I think I should have chose it at. And so, I mean, they're not for the faint-hearted in that sense, and I think we were very lucky to do them at a time where we didn't have kids. I had a husband at the time, but that being able to have no responsibilities meant that it was kind of okay if our lives bust wide open,
Because they already had.
And we weren't really responsible for anyone else. Well, we weren't. Did I have a cat at that time? Yeah. Also
Clickbait,
really helped my
rest in
relationship
peace.
with my cats. Yeah, clickbait, RIP. We had the kind of openness that was like a sort of privilege to be able to have, because, if you have kids, if you have kids and like a high demand job and a marriage and like if you have a lot more things in your life that you kind of need to hold together, there's a lot more potential for those things to get bust open, because psychedelics don't necessarily discriminate, there's just truths you might be forced to confront that you don't want to confront. So
when you see that, again, everything as a result of cause and effect, you see the causes that are affecting you in specific ways, and you see that process playing out, and you
And
can't ignore it.
It's kind of a red pill, blue pill thing, because it's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So, you know, once I realized I didn't want to be a 22-year-old wife, there's no going back from that. You know, you can try and like double down and talk yourself back into it, but it, you know, there's hard truths.
What is it? A mind expanded to new dimensions can never take its former shape or something like that. My first experience with LSD, a little bit more intense on a big dose. I remember you had left and I was I started just to feel very like floopy, like, and laid down on your floor. You had like a really soft rug, and I remember just like writhing in it, and everything kind of had this like rainbow sheen to it, kind of this iridescence, and everything kind of was just kind of wiggly. And then from those wiggles,
from the wiggles came the eternal summer.
And isn't that, though, that's a takeaway of psychedelics. Alan Watts talks about how literally everything is just wiggles.
Yeah.
Like, that's string theory. It's like just a bunch of stuff wiggling.
Is it?
And yeah, I mean, it's just like
I've
everything is just tiny wiggles, and that's what light is. It's just long waves of wiggles, and color is wiggles, and sound is wiggles, and it's all just wiggling together. And here we are, the result of many wiggles. And what is our favorite thing to do as humans is to get together and wiggle. There was sort of a profound element to that. I remember seeing this pattern, and it's kind of different than what you expect, like seeing on TV how drugs are portrayed, like a cartoon elephant wanders into the room and you're like, whoa,
which makes them seem so scary unless you're the type of person who craves extreme experiences like that, like my uncle. But I was very scared at the idea of just seeing things that weren't real, but that wasn't really
I've always been able to differentiate, even if it's like a strong visual. I've never been like, oh, this thing is here with me. Just like, oh, it kind of looks like a face in the trees or something. But anyway, I saw this like, Venus of Willendorf, I think it is. It's like that Paleolithic woman. It's like one of the first ever artistic artifacts we've ever discovered of this like very busty, very voluptuous woman. And she has no face. And I saw like that. And in the way that like what I was experiencing in my body at that time was this like sensing my body in a way that I had never really like paid attention to just the inner, like sat and tried to notice the inner workings of my own body. The only time I'd notice is if I had a headache or a stomach ache, then it's like, oh my God, my stomach. But I'd never just be like, stop and focus on that. And it made me aware of this like sensuality existing in me that I just had never considered before. And ultimately like my own femininity. And I guess through various LSD trips and just psychedelic trips generally, I hate to be the guy it's like a meme now of the guy who had to do psychedelics to gain empathy.
I had to do psychedelics to gain empathy, okay?
But I did, and the thing is I've always been an empathetic person. Like someone will tell me a moving story and I'll cry and be like, I just want to help people.
But it's deeper than that.
It's deeper than that.
And empathy is a learned skill, and I not always, but I think it is often true that psychedelics can expand your empathy faster than, regular life, especially if you're not committed to expanding your empathy, which before psychedelics I wouldn't even have really understood the need to expand your circle of compassion, and to be working on empathy as a skill. But there is, if you're in an altered state and you really are able to sort of go into how another person might be feeling again because you're less lost in the illusion of the self, that makes a big difference.
Or even like an animal. I've heard people say like, oh, drugs are so silly. They make you think you're a tiger. Like, how stupid. And I was like, I used to kind of think along that lines. And then I was like, if you could actually experience what it would be like to be a tiger, wouldn't that change everything? Wouldn't that's an experience unlike anything you could have in just waking day-to-day life that would drastically change the way that you consider the world. So that's like literal magic. Like, what do you mean you wouldn't want to know what it'd be like to be a tiger just for a little bit?
And it's also, typically, it's not that you think you're a tiger, but it's like if you're watching Planet Earth on psychedelics, for example, you are just so much more able to sort of put yourself in the shoes of that tiger.
To sense what it is like to be a conscious being in a different body.
Yeah, and to see the common, like, we are mammals. Homo sapiens are not in some separate class of animal. We are classed under mammals. So, like, it's perfectly reasonable to be seeing yourself in a tiger when you really think about it, you know, for the same reason that we often see ourselves in dogs and cats and pets. It's like...
And we think of it as anthropomorphizing, us projecting human traits onto them, when it's recognizing the commonality.
Because mammals, like, what we all have in common is mammals, like, love their young dearly, and, like, there's a reason we're classed with mammals, is all I'm saying. Like, we're more similar to them than we are different. Otherwise, we'd be in a whole different category of animal, right?
Mm-hmm. I just think of you saying at every single mammal, it's all rats.
It is all rats.
We're all just rats. Some of us bigger rats.
Yeah, every animal kind of looks the same after a while. You can see evolution.
You can really see it.
It's right there. There's so many things before psychedelics that I can now see were, like, your brain does a lot of, I was just talking to you about this before we filmed, but your brain does a lot of flattening most of the time. Because obviously you can't move through life seeing everything as, like, vivid and alive, or you'd never get anything done. Like, your brain has to, like, what we experience as reality is obviously through the filters of our brain, and those filters are in place so that we can sort of be concerned with what's important and sort of filter out what isn't important. But psychedelics kind of take off those filters, and you're able to, you know, it doesn't really, like, tigers aren't really that, they don't really matter to us in our regular life. We haven't really been conditioned to have a reason to care about them, although we do have, I suppose, the wiring from hundreds of thousands of years ago to outrun them. So they are relevant. But,
and we don't want them to go extinct.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, psychedelics gives you so many more opportunities to look at things in a new way and to, like, unflatten them, to just see things more, like, as they are.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I was, you know, in thinking about this video and kind of having it in the back of the mind as I'm going through my day-to-day stuff. I was having a conversation with my partner last night and talking about women and how, like, psychedelics gave me a perspective, not like I know what it means to be a woman, but getting in touch with my own femininity and recognizing that as an aspect of myself that had been before repressed and unconscious, and also gave me a deep compassion for women and the feminine experience in a way that I could only conceptualize before, because I would have called myself, actually probably at that time I was probably more of a feminist than you.
Yeah.
I remember having a couple conversations.
But I still just feel like that's because I grew up in a less sexist society, so that I didn't, what you would have considered feminism was not to me, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So to me, the label feminist at that time meant something extreme, which obviously is like bullshit.
Yeah.
I see that now.
And of course, with the joke of telling a woman that you could be more feminist than them, like...
Well, you will. I mean, we were on this pretty much the same page, but yeah.
But it did give me, like, it made that experience so much more real to me in a way that I struggle to convey. And because until, like, I guess before, I always had my life and I projected whatever was going on in my mind and in my experience onto other people. And it was still with love and genuine regard for people's well-being or the well-being of things and beings, but not with that, like, conceptualization of them having a, like, totally unique experience, completely different than mine, subject to different factors and influences than what is informing my experience. And I remember watching, there was, like, some kind of dating show that we watched, and there was, like, this older guy who at some point on the episode came, it was like a Netflix thing, it came up that he had done drugs in his life earlier on. Remember that?
I remember that dating show, yeah.
What was that called?
I think it was just set in New York, and they would just film first dates, I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, just like...
It was really fascinating.
Dating in New York, yeah.
But I remember the guy talking about it and him saying, like, you know, overall they just made me, like, a gentler person. And I definitely feel that. Like, they gave me regard for life as a process that's happening in all living things. Like, this plant here wants to live and, like, seeks out the nutrients and things that it needs, and it also suffers in a way. You know, it's capable of feeling a negative stimulus that makes it recoil. But then also for women and for people, all kinds of people different than myself. Ultimately, they helped me process my bisexuality and showed me the ways that me shoving that down and the reasons why, and just showed me this like aspect of me that had been totally unconscious, that I was therefore after able to like fully integrate into my personality and my life, that has been such a fountain of richness for me. It's connected to my artistic endeavors, which I think, you know, seeing that feminine figure, that Venus of Willendorf or whatever, was kind of my like artistic awakening, as it were, of realizing like, whoa, everything is connected, and it's connecting in me, and I am the part that gets to consciously be a part of that co-creative process of like the universe recreating itself through me, and I get to just like witness it happening. And unless you've had the experience, I mean, maybe that just sounds like mystical and whatever, but it's so deep and really has just stuck with me ever since. And even though I don't do psychedelics like I used to, I can return to that awareness, and that still governs the way that I live my life and the way I'm able to. It helped heal me of Mormon trauma for sure, where I could process the things that had been done to me in Mormonism, the stuff that I was, the bad aspects or the harmful aspects, and then were able to help me work through it, and then have compassion for the people still in it, and to experience a degree of like actual forgiveness, where now I can talk about it and point out the criticisms, but it doesn't wreak havoc on my soul like it used to be, like it used to do.
I do feel like psychedelics really, the concepts of forgiveness that I feel like Jesus talked about and a lot of spiritual teachers have talked about, I would have no real understanding of them, I don't think, without psychedelics, or at least I didn't before psychedelics. Like the idea, does Jesus say in the Bible, forgive them for they know not what they do? Okay, like that, I mean, that really hits home. Just because, again, I do believe we're all the products of our genetics and our conditioning, and a lot of people don't really get enough of an experience of kind of going beyond the self to even sort of, you know, not everyone gets the chance to like deconstruct everything about themselves and then rebuild, because it's sort of a privilege in a way to even like, I think awakening happens through grace. I mean, just the fact that we happen to be led to psychedelics and we happen to leave Mormonism, and I don't know, nothing is really chosen. It's all just an interplay of factors. And I feel like once you start understanding that, and you get rid of this idea of free will, that, you know, everyone who does bad things is just choosing to be bad, and they're no different from you except that you're good and they're bad. And once you just start realizing that everyone is just the result of, like, you know, that energy's evolutionary trajectory, it does make you more forgiving, and you're a lot more able to understand, well, A, why people act the way that they do, but also why it's important to seek understanding of why people do the things they do, even when those things are harmful. Because I feel like in our society we have this resistance to really digging into, why did this person do this really terrible thing? And you see pushback from like the left, for example, on Twitter, whenever someone, let's say, I don't know, commits a school shooting, and then there'll be talk in the media about you know, that person having mental health issues. It's like we're so resistant to any suggestion that like there are reasons why people do the things that they are, and we like to like broadly categorize so much that we're like, well, I have, you know, said mental illness, or I went through that thing in my life and I didn't shoot up a school. And it's like, yeah, but everyone has a different interplay of factors. And I think people have this idea that if we are truly like trying to like empathize with and understand why people do bad things, that we're somehow excusing them. But in my mind, and this is something we've talked about for years, it's just the more effective way to like reduce harm in this world. If you can understand how someone gets to the point where they shoot up a school, and you can empathize, which I know sounds scary because it sounds like you're in some way belittling the harm, but I don't think it does that at all. I think it actually honors the harm more, because it is just a more effective approach to reducing harm, understanding, rather than just being like, well, they're terrible and like they just, I mean, I'm not commenting on punishment right now, but it's so much, it's kind of comforting to just believe that it's free will. and like people just choose to be terrible, because then we can be like, well, I've never had that. I'm never going to do anything that bad, you know, because I'm just a good person. And that's another thing psychedelics kind of gave me, is they sort of did away with the idea of good and bad in my mind. There's helpful and there's unhelpful, but humans are so
relative.
We're obsessed with categorizing people into good and bad, and it's like most of the time, like a lot of the healthiest, nicest people, I mean, I just feel like everything's luck, really. It's like you just had the right set of genetics and circumstances in life to help you become that. And again, people often will balk at that idea because they think it minimizes effort and stuff. But I just think even like your ability to put forth effort is kind of like conditioned. Even believing that you're capable of change, even believing that being good is beneficial and useful. You know, if you're raised in an environment where there's just so much harm and trauma happening all the time, you may have learned at a young age that it's not safe to be empathetic, or it's going to only hurt you in life if you're too kind. Or so I feel like we have to start like thinking more holistically like that and being systems thinkers. And psychedelics was what, I mean, I know this is like a whole conversation, I'm kind of just skimming over it, but like that's kind of what cracked that wide open for me in a way that I mean, I still feel deeply passionate about, and that feels like quite a backbone of my what do you believe now? It's like what I believe now is that we're all the products of our genetics and conditioning. So like, let's work with that. And obviously we have to act as if free will is real. But I think there's enormous benefits in also realizing that it's not. You say things now.
It's paradoxical or spectrum-y.
And I'm comfortable with paradox.
I love that you mentioned absurdism and grace. I think Camus would be very proud.
Thank you.
Because that's psychedelics kind of reveal the absurdity, and prior to experiencing them, the absurdity was so tragic of just like, I can't believe I'm just a monkey on a rock in space. That is so stupid. Like, I felt so like helpless and alone. And then to have that switched and have the light turned on and being like, whoa, the absurdity is like, what of all the rotten like luck, what an experience to have and to know it and you've
been a pretty comfortable monkey.
And I've been a bit, yeah, no, totally.
And you've got a lot available.
There's a lot to be grateful for.
Like, you've got a lot of ways you can play and explore and enjoy and connect and love, and so it could be worse.
And where I didn't have that yet, I saw the ability to manifest that or to embody that in ways that I didn't before, that I never even conceptualized myself being able to do, because if you're just following a script for yourself, you don't know anything else, like the fish out of water.
And you don't realize you're following the script if you can't see the script.
Yeah.
You just think it's you. And I think we all have these like maybe moments throughout our lives where we kind of know that we are not our egos, like thinking about ego through the lens of like sort of the masks we wear or the false sense of self that we build up. Like, I remember even as a kid, there would just be times where I would act a certain way and then be like, but I feel different inside. Like, I'm tricking them, you know? But then it's like, almost like as you get older, there is so much potential for these masks to sort of become you. Because when the whole world starts seeing you as that, that's how you see yourself as. And then I almost started seeing my inner world as like the aberration. And the ego kind of can become the main thing. Not always, and that's a complex conversation to get into, but you do have these small senses throughout your life, I feel like, of times when you're to the external world acting very sincere, but you feel like the disconnect, you know, you feel that it's a mask. But yeah, psychedelics gave us the opportunity to actually like dive into that phenomenon and break it apart. And
the result of being able to step outside of the ego is a measure of grace. And grace is a topic I've been thinking a lot about.
Me too. Awakening happens through grace.
I
really believe that.
And because Christians so often think they have a monopoly on grace, and like Christ is the source of all grace, and it's like, no, grace is literally absurdism. It's like,
did Christ say awakening happens through grace?
No.
Who said that?
Probably Eckhart Tolle.
No, it's in the Bible.
I don't think so.
It's not?
I don't think it
Eckhart
talks about
Tolle did
awakening.
say. Okay. I feel like there is stuff in the Bible.
There is,
that
I mean, obviously it
concept.
talks about grace, which is why Christians are such fans that we are only, as Mormons say, only by grace we are saved, after all we can do.
See,
but
you
really,
used
it's
to
not
think
even.
of that as like, oh, God's benevolence is the thing that will save you. There's nothing you can do. But now I realize I see that.
It's like there's no reason, it just happened. And
yeah, you're just fucking lucky that you like woke up from your conditioning enough and you had the right conditions to sort of break patterns or, you know, learn to love or expand your empathy or see reality more clearly.
And the grace that it gave me is being able to, like, for instance, when we get a person who comments on the channel with just like a heinous insult toward me. Oftentimes when I'm in my egoic framework, that can just hurt. It just hurts to read critical stuff, especially when it's not, you know, it's false things or horrific things or, you know, stuff that people just don't understand, and I just want to like,
or
and
just
I can
feeling how much vitriol someone can have towards someone they don't know is like disturbing. It's disturbing to feel like you live in a world where people can just carry that amount of hate.
Yes, and I do love, like, there's a part of me that loves to just be able to like fire something back and really put someone in their place.
You're so good at it.
And that's kind of like a natural egoic cause and effect. Someone has done something harmful for me, so I'm going to throw it back in their face. And the absurd grace obtained by, or the Buddhists have a context for this principle, they call it crazy wisdom, of just this like senseless kindness of like, you're going to treat me that way, but I know that this is just an ego talking to me that's trying to get a rise out of my ego, and I don't have to play that game at all. And once I can kind of lower my defenses and just interact with a person, and I don't always do this perfectly. If you fought with me on YouTube before, sorry. But when I can step back into that place and just interface with someone with kindness, it's amazing the way that it shifts everything in the way that
Not
person
always.
interacts. Not always, but I've had some like
Yeah.
really like about faces in conversation
When
with people.
you respond to ego with non-ego, I
with
mean, that's
absurd
your only
grace.
hope, yeah. And absurdism is also, yeah.
Yeah, absurdism just as a, versus like playing into it and trying to fight it out or...
There are so many things with psychedelics that feel challenging to talk about because they do just sound kind of abstract until you've experienced them. Like there are so many scriptures in various religions that they really are so like a lot deeper than you would get just from a surface reading. And it really does kind of take an altered state to understand them, or like a shift in at least kind of like the mainstream way that the egoic human mind works. But then there also are these very concrete things we're talking about that psychedelics can give you that, I mean, it's nice to be able to talk about them too. You know, like the empathy and the increased connection to nature. And I mean, understanding self-love as a concept, that was another big one for me.
Oh, yeah. Probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
And really a sense of like...
And depersonalizing things in a weird way does make you love yourself more, because you're like, who am I to think I'm any more or less worthy of love than everything else on this planet? Like, I'm nothing special. I didn't choose to be this. No one chose to be them. We're all sentient. We're all capable of suffering. And we're all, I think, generally wired to sort of hurt when we see others hurt. We don't like seeing others hurt. Unless we've been really badly wounded, and maybe some people can enjoy seeing others get hurt. But even then, they might not like seeing a dog get hurt, or... You know, we all have our little circles of what we don't like, but where was I going with that point?
Psychedelics definitely help me, well, first of all, give me more insight into the nature of love, like the person in the high school art class who told me God is love, like the Bible says, or, you know, the Beatles say, all you need is love. I remember Thomas S. Monson being like, some say all you need is love, and then he made this face like, and I was like, isn't God love, like, isn't that kind of true though?
And by the way, we just had a whole conversation about this recently, but talking earlier about the, what did you call it? Crazy wisdom. The wisdom that comes from being you said like senseless
process.
Love, but I'm like, it really isn't senseless when you get down to it.
No, it makes total sense.
It's like the most logical response is love, and that can, again, that's something that would have just seemed so woo-woo to me before psychedelics, the idea that like love is the answer. It's like, okay, but you can't fight fire with fire. That's just kind of we humans control the world at this point, and we are very wounded, and we act from a wounded ego is like the most destructive force in the world at this point. I feel like it does take love to disrupt, you know?
My sense is that everything really is connected as one process. You can view the universe as an organism of which we are facets, maybe like a bacteria, you know, on my skin is still part of me and a necessary part of the process that is Tanner. So we are processes of this universe. And because everything is connected in that way through this long web of cause and effect, just the awareness of that is to recognize that everything is connected in love. Because if I truly love myself, then I truly love everything, because everything is part of what it means for me to be me. And so if I have any love for myself, that love is for everything. And so the way that I love myself and the way that I love the external world are the same process. And it helped me see my life as an act of love, just as an act of love, and that centered in living the kind of life that made life worth living. Getting back to the Camus quote of like, should you commit suicide? And this was like, well, if I'm going to live a life of emptiness and hollowness and repression, then that isn't a life worth living, but one that's creative and that's surrounded by meaningful relationships, doing meaningful work, having a little bit more freedom, being more engaged in my body, being out in nature more. That is a life that is very much worth living. And so it gave me the tools to visualize what I actually wanted and what I actually needed out of life in order to feel fulfilled and happy and like it was worth progressing through.
And I think realizing that, you know, as much as we talk about free will not really being real, that you are the agent that creates what your life is going to look and feel like, instead of just expecting some external meaning to be given to you.
Yes.
Which, I mean, that's the vacuum that's left after Mormonism, is you're like, what do you, that's why everyone's so quick to be like, what do you believe now? It's like, well, maybe nothing, you know? It's like, it's healthy to not need to rush to fill that vacuum. I mean, you're going to die anyway, so you might as well choose as much as you can a life that you want to live.
I was also going to say...
And then it'll be over. So it's like, either way, you're going to end up dead. So you might as well give it a go. Well. It's like, this is probably the one time you'll get to do this. So see what you can make of it. The worst thing that can happen is you die, which is going to happen anyway.
I was going to say, in response to filling the hole of God, also of seeking that love from other people, or what... confusing what love actually is with what other people can offer you, which is a sense of safety and familiarity and all that. Realizing that, like, oh, I am alone on this rock in a way, and I am responsible for loving myself, for giving, for providing for myself, for not expecting somebody else to make me happy. And if I can do that, once I've done that for myself, I acquire power, grace to offer to others, but it has to first start as something that's directed toward yourself. And I think we've both been on that journey for years now of embodying those initial visions of what a holistic life could look like.
Psychedelics really go hand in hand with Carl Jung's ideas about the shadow self and shadow work, don't they? Because they really do shine light on the parts of yourself that you maybe could have kept hidden for quite a long time from yourself, and would have been living in reaction to, or like your psyche kind of knows that you're not ready to have those things come to the forefront of your mind, so it keeps them down, and so you're always living in reaction to these things. So therefore those things, you know, your shadow self does control you in all these ways. But another thing I was going to say is psychedelics definitely helped me arrive at the conclusion that you can't love someone else until you love yourself. And I know there's pushback on that idea, because it comes across as like, oh, if you have low self-esteem, then you can't be loved, and it's
you don't deserve to be in a relationship.
Yeah, it's not that, but it is that, you know, the more whole you are on your own, the more you're able to sort of complete yourself, so to speak, or to feel lovable and worthy on your own, independent of other people, even though we are interdependent people and we do need each other, then the less you're showing up in a relationship like needing them to fill a hole. And so obviously that is going to change. It might be a hard truth, but that is going to change the quality of the love that can be there. Because I think the truest version of love is sort of like non-possessive and just fully accepting of exactly what the other is, you know, that. And so, but if you're needing to fill gaps in your own sense of wholeness, then you are going to be looking to relationships through that lens. And where there are ways that the way another person is doesn't fill those gaps, or maybe calls into question your own self-worth for whatever reason. I mean, there's a lot to this conversation. It's just, love is sort of a spectrum, and it's also a learned skill, and it's something that we can all, I think, get better at throughout our lives. But if we use the working definition of love as just complete acceptance and admiration, I would say, for just what another being or what
the unique
other
peculiarities
is.
of another person.
Yeah, then it's like, it's almost like love is not personal in a weird way, because it's not self-seeking. I'm not looking
It's not
to
egoic,
you.
it's the opposite of egoic.
My appreciation of you is not dependent on what you can give me, and if I truly love you, then the ways that you are that conflict with the ways I am, like maybe you believe differently or you act in ways that make me uncomfortable sometimes, like that's not affected by my love for you if it's sort of the truest kind of love, because I'm not...
Unless it's to a point where you have to extricate from yourself from a situation out of that self-love and preservation for your own well-being and peace.
Oh, yeah, of course. And yeah, not out, yeah. And I think the more you love yourself, also the more you'll choose people who will love you in the way that you love yourself. Like, I think we generally pick partners who love us kind of to the level that we are able to love ourselves. Not, that's... nothing's like a concrete always statement, but...
If you learned one thing from drugs, then nothing's concrete.
Taking none of this too seriously. But yeah, it is true. I mean, drugs have definitely helped me become more accepting of people being different to me, and because I know better than to make it about me. It's not about me, Have I explained that concept?
You did.
People are going to hate me for it.
No, it's beautiful.
Okay.
People are going to be like, go off, Sam.
I mean, because I was someone who absolutely struggled with, an abandonment wound and a very anxious attachment style. I need to start this again. And so I wasn't able to love as deeply then as I am now, having healed those things more, because I was always, A, trying to fill holes within myself, B, looking to others through the lens of what they could give me, and also resenting them for ways that they made me feel insecure, which wouldn't actually a lot of the time be them doing anything wrong, but it was just like the interplay of the way they were with the way I wasn't favorable to me and my insecurity, and so therefore that made it harder for me to love them, because it sort of turned into resentment quite easily, which I think is like a familiar thing in dating, where a lot of the time people resent others just for being different and not being able to meet their needs, because maybe no one can, or maybe someone can but this person can't, and you can't resent them for not being able to meet your needs.
Right. Again,
this is all under the umbrella of like, you got to be with people that are safe and good to you, and obviously please don't extrapolate in unhinged ways. I'm begging you. We are advocates for healthy relationships.
This isn't TikTok. We don't tolerate that shit.
Yeah, we're not going to take it on this, our special LSD video, okay?
I feel like one of the biggest gifts they gave me was the ability to be with myself.
Yes.
I feel like I was always such an extrovert, which meant I was horrified and terribly anxious at any time spent alone. I felt like I just craved being around other people, and would often spend time with people who weren't the best for me out of fear and just inability to experience life on my own. And that's why I talk about art in connection with spirituality and with drugs, because it is deeply personal to me. When I'm making something on my own, it's an act of love. It's an ability to just like literally have fun alone, and to believe that the things happening in my interior world are worth spending time alone on. And then once I bring them forth, there are people who appreciate it, and it kind of becomes the gift that I gave to myself, which is just being willing to spend quality time with myself, and to, take myself to the gym and climb up my little rock so my monkey brain can be satisfied. Just doing that for myself as an act of love so that I can do the work and bring forth, these creative aspects of myself ends up being my gift to the world. And not that I have a grandiose vision of what I'm doing here, what I'm offering, because I do appreciate like the absurdity and silliness of what I do. I don't think everything has to be this like life-changing, profound, beautiful orchestral music. It's like I love silliness. Something can just
be one tiny percentage of one brick in someone's like massive wall of what helps them in this life.
But that's what I want to be doing, is just little bite-sized happiness for people. And if I can put a smile on someone's face, as cliche as it sounds, then I feel like I did a good job. Even what's his name? Doors of Perception. Not Albert Hoffman. He
Aldous Huxley.
invented Aldous Huxley, who wrote Doors of Perception. Big psychedelic writer. At the end of his life, saying, you know, it's kind of crazy, kind of silly that at the end of my life, the best advice I have is just be a little more kind. But I definitely feel that, and 100%. Psychedelics, more than anything in the world, have helped me realize the importance of it and understand how to apply that both to myself and to others.
Yeah. Love is a disrupting force, and you won't fight fire with fire. Just sit with that.
Mull on that for
no
a
more
minute.
War. Such a big topic. We've already talked for probably 2 hours, so we probably should cut this off. We could always do another video, of course. So if you guys have questions or comments or things you want us to talk about more, I feel like we could talk for so many more hours about the ways psychedelics have changed us.
Oh yeah.
And helped us.
I will always be grateful.
Yeah.
As I am grateful to our viewers and especially our patrons. Nobody has changed us more than you.
Nobody's more special than others, but you guys are more special. In this little egoic reality, you guys are top of the crop.
It is fun once you experience personallessness to get into the personal.
Then you can enjoy it. Then you can play with the ego.
It's more fun.
Yes. And also, no more.
We're not doing this.
This is over. This video is done.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Hopefully it was a fun trip for you.
Please support the channel if you found this valuable in any way.
Thank you so much. We love you. See you soon.
Bye. Love you. Oh my god, such an abrupt ending after such a deep video. Like, we should spend more time saying goodbye.
Some aftercare.
Yeah.